the people of Eastern Europe have suffered for generations, caught in the middle of endless conflict, whether it was the brutal clash of the Red and White armies a century ago, or the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine today. Look close enough at history, and uncomfortable questions start to emerge. Were these opposing leaders funded by the exact same power brokers profiting off the chaos? Or is there something even darker driving it? A cycle of deep-seated, generational revenge? Who do you think is really pulling the strings behind these endless conflicts? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Today we trace this devastating pattern back to where it truly accelerated. When the Bolsheviks seized power, they knew that to control the nation, they had to destroy its spiritual heart. But they didn't expect what happened next. How did a hunted group of bishops and one defiant patriarch ignite a faith that couldn't be crushed? This is the untold story of the new martyrs of Russia. In the cold winter months of 1918, a silent terror settled over the ancient cities of Russia. The Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, had seized power in the October Revolution of 1917. With that seizure of power came a brand new vision for human society, built on radical Marxism, state-sanctioned atheism, and the absolute destruction of the old world order. For nearly 1,000 years, the Russian Orthodox Church had served as the spiritual and cultural heart of the nation. Its golden onion domes dotted every horizon, from the grand boulevards of Petrograd to the humblest peasant villages in the frozen taiga. Its priests baptized the newborn, blessed the harvests, married the young, and conducted final resting rites. The church held vast tracts of land, priceless historic treasures, and the deep, enduring devotion of millions of ordinary believers. To the new Bolshevik regime, however, the church was not a sacred institution. It was a dangerous, superstitious enemy. They viewed the clergy as class enemies and agents of the fallen Tsarist regime. If the communist revolution was to succeed, the influence of the Christian faith had to be completely wiped out. At the center of this gathering storm stood one man, Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow. Chosen in late 1917 as the first patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in over 200 years, Tikhon was a gentle, humble, and deeply spiritual leader. He was widely respected for his kindness and pastoral care, yet he found himself thrust into one of the most violent periods in human history. In January of 1918, as reports of church lootings and mob violence began pouring into his office, Patriarch Tikhon made a dramatic decision. He issued an official decree known as an Anathema. In this document, Tikhon publicly excommunicated the Bolshevik leaders. He condemned their violent actions and warned them that they were walking a dangerous spiritual path. He called upon the faithful to defend their sacred holy sites through peaceful moral resistance. The Bolshevik response was swift, calculating, and ruthless. The leaders of the regime, along with their newly formed secret police, known as the Cheka, recognized a major tactical danger. Targeting Patriarch Tikhon directly would create an immediate, legendary martyr. It could spark a massive, unstoppable resistance among the deeply religious peasant population. So, the Cheka devised a far more targeted strategy. They decided to leave the Patriarch alive in his quarters, surrounded by guards, while systematically dismantling his entire inner circle. By arresting and removing the senior metropolitans, bishops, and close advisors who managed the church, the Bolsheviks intended to decapitate the ecclesiastical leadership. They planned to paralyze the entire administration, leaving Patriarch Tikhon isolated and powerless. The systematic campaign against Patriarch Tikhon's inner circle began in the historic city of Kiev in January of 1918. The target was Metropolitan Vladimir Bogoyavlensky, one of the most senior and respected bishops in the entire Russian realm. Metropolitan Vladimir was 69 years old. He was a man of quiet dignity who had spent his long life serving the church and overseeing major historic monasteries. He was a crucial organizational pillar for Patriarch Tikhon. On the night of January 25, 1918, a squad of armed Red Guards broke into the ancient Kiev Pechersh Lavra monastery. They forced their way into the Metropolitan's private rooms. The soldiers demanded money, insulted his faith, and accused him of hoarding wealth while the working class starved. Vladimir remained calm and soft-spoken throughout the ordeal. The soldiers dragged the elderly bishop out of his quarters, past the ancient stone walls of the monastery, and into a dark, deserted ravine nearby, realizing that his final moment had arrived. Metropolitan Vladimir asked his captors to let him offer one last prayer. The request was granted. The bishop knelt on the frozen earth. He prayed aloud to God, asking for the forgiveness of his own sins. Then, he looked up at the young soldiers. He raised his right hand, making the sign of the cross toward them, and said his final words, "May the Lord forgive you your sin." Moments later, the soldiers opened fire, and he passed away on the snow. Metropolitan Vladimir became the very first high-ranking bishop to lose his life during the Red Terror. News of his loss sent a wave of shock throughout the Christian world, serving as a grim harbinger of the difficult years that lay ahead. As 1918 progressed, the Russian Civil War erupted into full force across the vast empire. The Red Army fought against the White Army, and the Cheka intensified its campaign of Red Terror in every city under Bolshevik control. In the city of Perm, located near the Ural Mountains, resided another close spiritual ally of Patriarch Tikhon, Metropolitan Andronik Nikolevsky. Andronik was a fiery, uncompromising defender of the church. When the Bolsheviks issued decrees seizing church property, Andronik openly condemned the actions from the pulpit. He instructed his priests to lock the church doors and refuse cooperation with the atheist authorities. His open defiance made him a prime target for the local Cheka agents. In June of 1918, armed officers arrested Metropolitan Andronik in his residence and took him to a regional interrogation center. The officers subjected him to intense mental and physical interrogation, demanding that he retract his condemnations and order his priests to submit to the new regime. Andronik steadfastly refused. On the night of June 20, 1918, the officers drove Andronik out into a dense forest on the outskirts of the city. Realizing his fate, the bishop maintained his resolve. The officers took his life in the secluded woodland and left him in an unmarked location, leaving no cross, no marker, and no record of the site. By 1921 and 1922, years of war, drought, and economic destruction brought a catastrophic famine to the Volga region of Russia. Millions of peasants faced starvation. The Soviet government, led by Vladimir Lenin, saw this tragic humanitarian disaster not just as a crisis, but as an opportunity. In early 1922, the regime issued an official decree ordering the total confiscation of all valuable items held by churches. This included gold chalices, jewel-encrusted icon frames, and silver reliquaries. The government claimed these treasures were needed to buy grain from abroad to feed the starving masses. Patriarch Tikhon and his advisors saw through the political trap. They offered to donate all church treasures that were not consecrated for holy use, and they volunteered to raise funds directly for famine relief. However, they insisted that sacred vessels used in the Holy Communion could not be handed over to secular authorities. Lenin explicitly welcomed this resistance. In a secret top memo to the leadership, he wrote that the famine presented a unique historic opportunity to strike a fatal blow against the clergy leadership. In Petrograd, modern-day St. Petersburg, the local church leadership was headed by Metropolitan Benjamin Kuzan. Benjamin was a gentle, deeply compassionate man who was immensely popular among the working-class citizens of the city. He had spent years establishing charitable kitchens and supporting poor families. Metropolitan Benjamin sought to avoid conflict. He met with local Soviet officials and negotiated an agreement to peacefully hand over valuable church items, provided that church members could oversee the process to ensure the funds actually went toward purchasing food. However, the central authorities in Moscow overruled the local agreement. They wanted a high-profile trial to break the moral authority of the church. In May of 1922, Metropolitan Benjamin was arrested along with 85 other priests, professors, and laypeople. They were charged with forming a conspiracy to oppose state famine relief. The trial took place in a crowded auditorium in Petrograd during June and July of 1922. State prosecutors launched harsh accusations against the defendants, ignoring evidence and presenting fabricated testimonies from state informants. Throughout the trial, Metropolitan Benjamin maintained total composure. When given his final opportunity to speak to the court, he did not plead for his life or offer defense arguments. Instead, he said, "I do not know what sentence you will pass upon me, life or death. But whatever your decision, I will raise my eyes upward, cross myself, and say, 'Glory to thee, O Lord God, for everything.'" On July 5, 1922, the court found Benjamin and several of his primary associates guilty and sentenced them to the ultimate penalty. To prevent public demonstrations by the thousands of citizens who loved the Metropolitan, the authorities kept the date secret. On the night of August 13, 1922, guards led Metropolitan Benjamin and 3 of his close associates out of their prison cells. They were driven to a secluded location near the Porokhovia station on the outskirts of Petrograd. There, in the dead of night, they were executed and placed in an unmarked mass grave. By late 1922, the strategy of the Cheka had achieved its primary objective. The core leadership surrounding Patriarch Tikhon had been systematically erased. Metropolitan Vladimir, Metropolitan Andronik, and Metropolitan Benjamin were all gone. Dozens of other senior bishops were either executed or sent to distant prison camps in the far north. With the Patriarch's inner circle completely shattered, the Soviet government launched the next phase of its plan, dividing the church from within. The secret police provided financial backing and official recognition to a small group of sympathetic clergymen. This government-backed faction called itself the Living Church, or the Renovationist movement. The Renovationists declared that Marxism and Christianity were fully compatible. They publicly praised the communist state, denounced Patriarch Tikhon as a traitor, and attempted to seize control of church administrative buildings across the country. They claimed to represent a new, modern form of Christianity that served the working class. In May of 1922, state agents placed Patriarch Tikhon under strict house arrest at the Donskoy Monastery in Moscow. Isolated from his loyal advisors, cut off from reliable news, and constantly interrogated by secret police officers, Tikhon was subjected to immense psychological pressure. The state apparatus forced him to watch as the Living Church took over hundreds of historic cathedrals with the help of police units. The state threatened Tikhon with an immediate public trial if he did not sign formal statements of loyalty to the Soviet regime. In 1923, weakened by failing health and broken by the constant news of losses among his loyal clergy, Patriarch Tikhon issued a statement declaring that he was no longer an enemy of the Soviet state. While this statement saved his life temporarily and prevented a full-scale legal trial, his health continued to decline rapidly. On April 7, 1925, Patriarch Tikhon passed away in a Moscow hospital under mysterious circumstances at the age of 60. Many historians believe he was targeted by state agents, though official reports recorded his passing as heart failure. The loss of Patriarch Tikhon's inner circle was part of a long, painful trial for religious believers in the Soviet Union. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, thousands of churches were converted into storage facilities or turned into museums of scientific atheism. Tens of thousands of priests, monks, nuns, and ordinary believers disappeared into the vast labor camp system known as the Gulag. Yet, despite decades of systematic state persecution, the strategy to completely erase faith failed. The dignified endurance of figures like Metropolitan Vladimir, Metropolitan Andronik, and Metropolitan Benjamin left a deep imprint on the cultural memory of the Russian people. Believers quietly preserved their stories, passing down memories through oral traditions and secret written memoirs. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Russian Orthodox Church officially canonized Patriarch Tikhon, along with thousands of bishops, priests, and laypeople who lost their lives during the Red Terror. They are remembered today collectively as the new martyrs and confessors of Russia. Today, modern memorial sites mark the places where these historic events occurred. At the Levashovo wasteland near St. Petersburg and the Budovo firing range near Moscow, simple wooden crosses stand above historical grounds containing the remains of thousands of believers. The story of Patriarch Tikhon's inner circle remains a powerful historical testament. It tells a story of profound moral conviction standing firm against total state power, and of individuals who chose to face adversity with quiet prayer, forgiveness, and dignity.